Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today for this panel session on food, agriculture and water. Just to kind of take you through a quick agenda of what to expect from this session. I'm just going to do a quick overview of the campaign that we've been running for the past couple of months, and then I will introduce you to our panel for the discussion of this session. And then we will be discussing some of the young leaders' recommendations in more detail with the panel. And then for the last 15 minutes, we'll just hand over to the audience in case there are any questions that they would like to ask our panel. So just to give a quick overview of the campaign. So yes, for the past couple of months, we've been running our Unite for UK Climate Action campaign. The aim of the campaign was to bring together a group of young leaders to volunteer to help us create a systems map of UK climate policy using the One Planet system. We wanted to create a national picture of what each local government was doing in terms of reducing carbon emissions and adapting to climate change. The systems map helps to identify best practice, understand where there are gaps, and identify opportunities to develop actions further to deliver co-benefits around health, nature recovery, and equity. We've worked collaboratively with the young leaders to form a set of recommendations which we feel local governments should be implementing to amplify their impact, amplify their impact in response to the climate crisis. But ultimately, what we hope this piece of work will do is to encourage local councils, businesses, and communities to come together and work together to create and deliver effective, joined-up solutions. How this session or the setup of the discussion will work is our young leader Tilly here, who will just shortly introduce herself, will be asking a few questions. She's picked a couple of topics around the recommendations and has got some questions that she will be posing to our panel, and then our panel will be responding to them with their key knowledge and nuggets of information that they have. So yeah, without further ado, I'll start with introducing our young leader, Tilly.
Hi everyone, good morning. So my name's Tilly and I'm on the panel today, as Neve's just said, because I was involved in the One Planet campaign as a young leader. So I've been helping map local authorities on the One Planet platform, and then identifying key areas kind of that's being missed overall by councils. So yeah, I'm here to kind of share my experience of that process and to put forward the young leaders' recommendations moving forward.
Great, thank you, Tilly. Emily, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Hiya, I'm Emily O'Brien. So I'm a councillor in Lewes District, where I'm the lead councillor for climate, nature and food systems. I also have a role with the Green Party. I'm a Green Party councillor and I'm the Green Party spokesperson on food, agriculture and rural welfare. Hi.
Great, thank you so much. And then I'm going to pass next to Nicola.
Hi everybody, I am the co-founder of the South East Climate Alliance, which covers Sussex, Surrey, Kent and Hampshire. We have over 130 organisations working on climate and ecological solutions. I've also spent the last 20 years working in the Ecuadorian Amazon, where I've been teaching agroforestry to prevent tropical deforestation. So one of the greatest movers, as we all know, of deforestation is agriculture. And so that's what I've been working with the people down there to show them alternatives through agroforestry.
Thank you so much, Nicola. And last but not least, Jack, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
I think possibly least in this case, but thank you anyway. I'm Jack and I am the co-founder and director of a small non-profit called Young Wilders. We do youth-led nature recovery work in the UK, And our two aims are to accelerate the nature recovery of the UK and to involve young people in the process and the broader movement. And we do that primarily through these small ecological restoration projects that we have scattered around, mainly in southern England. And at each stage of that process, like the restoration process, where just getting as many young people, local young people who want to be involved.
Great, thank you so much. So yeah, I'm going to just hand over to Tilly to kick off the discussion with some of the sort of areas that she wants to focus on, with some questions that she has for the panel.
Yeah, so for the theme of food, agriculture and water, the young leaders presented, I think there was 7 recommendations altogether. But I know because of time constraints, we're not going to be able to cover them all. So I've picked out 3, which I think are, quite significant. So I thought if we can just crack on with them and start the discussion. So I guess since that the food and farming industry account for, a lot of emissions, I think nearly a fifth. I thought it would be useful to start the discussion around regenerative land practices. So during the mapping process, the young leaders identified that many local authorities mentioned kind of the need for a shift towards more sustainable farming methods. So there was kind of an acknowledgement there. But what we found is that a lot of climate strategies kind of lacked any tangible actions on how they would facilitate or implement this. So we suggested that the actions must go a lot further to be regenerative in nature, so that farming methods can provide a range of core benefits for the environment as well as society. So for example, better food security, better soil and water quality, increased biodiversity. So we recommended that councils need to support farmers through this transition by, 1, providing a lot more financial support, and 2, through better kind of awareness and training programs. So I think at the national level, you can see that governments have tried to make some effort through providing financial support. So, for example, through the environmental land management payment schemes and things like that. But I don't think, or for me personally, I don't think they go as far in offering as much training and support, kind of around like the education on regenerative practices. So I guess I just wanted to, turn to the rest of the panel and ask, do these policies go far enough? What else, I guess, can be done to help make that transition easier for farmers?
Great, Tilly, that's an excellent question. So Jack, do you want to go first? I see your hands raised.
Sure, yeah. This is just quite front of mind for me, as this is something that we've been discussing internally as an organization quite a lot. I'd be really interested to hear the other panel's thoughts on what I'm about to say. But we're quietly hopeful about this side of things, which is pretty rare for us in terms of like environmental things more broadly. But we speak to a lot of landowners in the UK, obviously, as part of our work. And a lot of them have been doing quite destructive land management practices for quite a long time. And it's obviously not something they've like especially enjoyed, but it's just always been about finances. And this is very anecdotal, obviously, but the impression that I've got is that the schemes coming in, so biodiversity net gain is going to allow for like more, although it's not specifically farming related, obviously, but it's going to allow money to come into land management practices that are pro nature. There's also a bunch of like kind of private nature market stuff coming in. Carbon credits is pretty loose. I don't really understand what's happening there, but people seem excited about that as well. So I think oddly, although a lot of these schemes are kind of stop and start and they're still quite vague, the broader pattern of this kind of land management being financially viable seems to be happening in the UK. And it's something that we're like feeling kind of quietly positive about, I would say. But yeah, the skills point that Tilly mentioned is really interesting, and I don't know enough about that. But with the money, I'm feeling okay.
Great, thank you, Jack. Either one of our other panel speakers, so Emily, if you'd like to add something.
Hiya. So I suppose I'm wearing 2 hats today, but it's interesting because your question says we don't think councils are doing enough on this. But actually, I think you have to look at the system in which councils operate. So actually, a lot of the powers to support farmers, the funding to support farmers, is very much nationally led. So with my National Green Party hat on, I would say absolutely, I agree with you. We need to do much more around supporting regenerative farming, preventing the kind of move towards ever more industrial and intensive farming, which is disastrous not only for carbon, as you said, and in fact, around a third of our individual carbon footprint is the food we eat, according to the UN. If you look at it across the whole food system chain, from production to processing to buying the stuff to eating it to wasting it. But at the same time, we have and also it's the biggest driver of nature loss in the UK. And let's not forget the catastrophe of the nature crisis. And we are one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. So I absolutely agree with you. In terms of what we can do as a council, though, a lot of the farming stuff sits nationally, and we are the most centralized country in Europe. So actually, people often look at councils and say, well, why aren't you doing this and why aren't you funding that? My answer is quite often, why do we live in a system where all the power and the money sits centrally and is continually, despite every government that comes in saying, oh, we're going to devolve more power locally, when they get there, they just centralize further. So my background's working around sustainable food. I would love to do more as a council. We are doing what we can do within our powers, I'd like to think. So biodiversity net gain, for instance, Jack mentioned, we introduced that already. We introduced local guidance well ahead of the national guidance. We've been doing it a couple of years, and every single planning application that comes through us has delivered 10% biodiversity net gain already. And in the consultation for our next local plan, we're looking to up that beyond the national minimum. So we're doing what we can. And also, through that consultation, there's some other really strong policies around supporting food growing projects, those kinds of things. But I would say, without those real, I'd love it if we had more power to work with and for our local farming sector. But the majority of that does sit nationally with DEFRA. So my magical powers are limited, but we absolutely are committed to doing what we can within those.
Thank you, Emily. No, that's really interesting because to kind of understand that actually a lot of the power is held nationally, not kind of at the more local level. Nicola, is there anything else that you'd kind of like to add?
Yeah, I think we also really need to talk about the size of farms, because what we really need is a lot of smaller farms. And it's the small farms that often find it really difficult because of the size of them to get, anything worth, applying for as far as kind of like the credits. One of the issues which the councils could start to look at is, housing, small affordable housing in rural locations for farmers. Because we've got two issues. We don't have the land in small enough blocks to encourage diversity of farming. And that is because there's nowhere for people to live in rural areas. The farm cottages have, long been kind of like developed. And so, that part of like, how can we encourage getting a movement of people back to the land in affordable rural areas so that they can actually, be the farmers of the future? Because one of the problems that we have right now is that the farming community, I can't remember what the average age is, I think it's 65. So where are the young farmers for the future, and where are they going to be able to live? So I'd just like to kind of like add that in.
Thank you, Nicola. No, it's a really, really interesting point. Emily, I see you've got your hand raised.
Can I just come back on Nicola's point, because I completely agree with her. And in our planning policy, we do seek to allow for diversification on the land which we are planning authority for. We're only the planning authority for about half our district, because quite a lot of it lies within the national park, and they make the rules within the national park. But for the area within ourselves. But actually, I think it's really easy to look at the council and say, well, why don't you just allow more housing doing X, Y, and Z? But actually, we are really constrained by the national rules on planning. And I often call the planning system a national system disguised as local, because actually what we're allowed to do within our planning policy is really constrained. So I'm sorry to keep saying I want to do it locally, but the national is the problem. But I always have to bring that up as a bit of a food and planning geek, is just to point out that our hands are quite tied on some of those things. So we don't we don't just have a free rein to say, oh, that come in, oh yeah, that sounds a good idea, let's do it. We have to follow all the national rules.
Sorry, because I obviously actually no, I'm now like want to ask a question, but no, Jack, you go. I'm only here to facilitate. I'm not.
This is just it's a slight tangent, and it's just an excuse for some self-promotion for me. But I wanted to shoehorn a point into this about if we imagining that the councils get the kind of funding and power they need, we've got these small farms, we've got affordable housing, people have moved back in, we've got money coming back in to allow for regenerative land management practices. The only thing between that world and like a kind of total utopia within this discussion, at least from our perspective, is the way in which the land is managed itself. So obviously there's the process, it's got to be pro nature, but our whole spiel is that we don't want this ecological work to be done just by a handful of kind of clinical contractors, although that is great too, because there's massive potential in doing this work in terms of like nature connectedness, engagement, like getting community building, getting people involved in these projects, making it public facing, also amazing for mental health stuff. I'm obviously like really trying to get across that we do volunteer days and want people to come down. But I think there's like two timelines coming up, possibly imagining that all these things we want to happen. And one is like quite a narrow sort of nature recovery process, which is really driven by metrics, and often that encourages corner cutting and things like that. And then like a more like value plural one that invites in all these other sorts of things. And allows for this kind of like really much needed kind of societal nature connectedness, if like everyone's getting a chance to like kind of be custodians of the land and work on it and connect to it that way. It's a bit corny, but that's kind of the vision. I wanted to throw it in.
No, that's great, Jack, and I think being corny is good. So as we're kind of like entering the kind of 10 minutes that I allotted for this question, I'm going to hand back to Tilly to kind of explore another question and get another discussion going.
Yeah, so another key area I wanted to touch on is around tackling food waste. I think since it's such a huge problem in the UK and I guess, the West in general. So after using the One Planet mapping platform, the young leaders kind of discovered that a lot of councils have made pledges around zero food waste in their climate plans. And I think this has been again reinforced at the national level, with governments committed to making zero food waste a mandatory requirement for local authorities, I think by 2026. So we recommended that food waste should be kept at the local level, by encouraging more community composting schemes and initiatives, and better use of community gardens. So again, I guess I just want to turn to the experts and ask, how feasible is this as a solution to keep it on the local level? And, what are the solutions are out there to help reduce food waste?
I could just follow on from that, because I did just convene a meeting the other day exactly on this point, because yeah, it's right that all councils by 2026 have got to be collecting food waste. So do they go down the same old story? And like Horsham District is who I was consulting for, and they're about to roll out a whole load of new trucks to go around like before and collect the food waste. And so it's like learning from those in other counties. So in Devon, you've got Dr. Compost, Nikki Scott, who's like the country's expert on composting. So I called him in on the meeting, and he has now been offered by Devon Council £200,000 to localise community composting, because they've realised they've got the trucks, they've been collecting food for years, and it's costing a lot of money. So, already Horsham's talking about, a small council, the millions that it would cost to run new trucks to pick up food waste. So is that really the ideal case scenario? Is that what we really want? And like you said, Tilly, exactly, we need to localize it. So it starts with, the supermarkets doing the bog off, buy one, get one free. I mean, the food waste, the whole kind of chain of it, of people being encouraged to buy more than they want. In schools, very little education with kids, about like food waste themselves and how to reduce it and what not to throw away. And then how do we keep it local? So absolutely, community composting. But what we need are more examples. And this is what we've been looking for. Who's already doing this around the country? So if we can reduce the amount of food that's coming from the houses, encourage, again, they did many years ago, encourage people to have their own little kind of like Daleks, which are not the best method of composting, but it's kind of been forgotten about. And in schools, they used to compost until COVID, and then when COVID came, they all stopped composting. So, we need to bring this back into that localization and start working with groups that are really efficient in ways of, not looking at it as a waste. We've got to move away from this idea of pick up waste and take it away to somewhere else. Instead, seeing it as an amazing resource to work locally. And that ties into really working with our local farmers. So is that the best place where we can be doing, community composting, is area by area, uniting up with local farmers.
Thank you, Nicola, so much. That was great. Emily, I see your mic has gone off, so I'll pass to you next.
Yeah, I wanted to agree with you. I mean, food waste is a huge issue, isn't it? Something like 1/8 of all the food produced ends up being wasted, which isn't sustainable. And if food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd biggest emitter after the US and China. So that's just from food waste, never mind all the other emissions from the food system. So I completely agree with you. I'm also a big fan of community composting. I'm a community qualified composter myself, community composter. I have the little certificate somewhere. And I worked for years for Brighton Hove Food Partnership, where we ran one of the biggest community composting schemes in the country. And it is something I'd like us to be able to support as a council, but I don't think it's the only answer. I think it's just part of a jigsaw. So as a council, what we've done is we do have a separated food waste collection already. And we have just electrified our fleet for that as well. So it's now a fully electric service collecting people's food waste, and it's also processed locally. So I've been to visit composting site, and it genuinely is a local scheme, just up the road. It doesn't have to travel loads of miles to some remote big depot. It's quite a small localized scheme, and really good compost comes out of that is then used, locally in the horticulture and and indeed back in the council's parks and things as well. We buy some of the compost back. So in terms of those schemes, but actually, as others have said, picking up the food waste and taking it away is actually the least important part. I always encourage people to think about the waste pyramid and the food waste pyramid. Actually, what we really need to do to prevent those emissions and all the water use as well, the environmental degradation that's gone with the production of those things, is to produce less waste in the first place. So although we're a small council and like other councils really strapped for money, we do have an officer who specifically does food waste reduction work with our residents to try and prevent the food waste in the first place. And obviously with my national hat on as well, I do think we do really need policies that are just way more stringent around a food waste reduction agenda, not least of which is making the farming system much fairer. So much food gets wasted, through things like unfair contracts that penalise farmers for the produce they do because they change their mind at the last minute, basically. So I think there's a whole kind of food waste thing when you look at it really starkly highlight all the other inequalities and weirdnesses and unfairnesses within the wider food system. But actually, what we still come back to is actually more waste is wasted in the home than anywhere else. Even if you look at the waste in supermarkets, if you look at the waste in farming, actually much more is wasted at home. So helping people with behaviour change to reduce that waste absolutely should be the number one. We could do the best food waste collection service in the world. We could have some great community composting, but actually what we need to do is stop stuff that is edible food waste. And not all of it is, there's peelings of things you can't eat. So let's not, pretend you can eat everything. But the edible waste that people are wasting within the household is the biggest contributor, and that should be the biggest target for action.
Thank you, Emily. Jack, I can see you've got your hand up, so
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to add, obviously, I agree with everyone. I think composting is excellent and we need to do a lot more of it. All of these conversations, I suppose, hinge around like efficiency calculations and trying to feed ourselves without using up kind of the least resources possible. And obviously, again, I'm kind of kind of shoehorning myself in here. I've been a kind of smug, preachy vegan for nearly a decade now, and I feel like this is a good opportunity to kind of get back in the game on that. Obviously, like I appreciate this. There's a big discussion to be had here, and it isn't always a straightforwardly good thing. There's lots of vegan foods that have their own big footprints, and there's lots of places where animal agriculture can be beneficial in different ways. But as a general rule, encouraging people to eat more vegan food is like a really helpful way to make our food chains more efficient. But I also appreciate it's a bit of a hot topic. It seems to be like a very sensitive topic in lots of parts of the country, and especially people in politics, like on all sides of the spectrum, seem pretty reluctant to bring it up as like a serious food solution, which I think is a real shame. And I guess I just hope that changes and want people to kind of be more open to the conversation. I feel like part of the conversation's been poisoned by smug people like me, so we've got to accept some responsibility for that. But I think it would be. I don't think we're going to get to where we need to without taking that conversation much more seriously as well.
No, well, us as young leaders completely agree. We have, as part of the recommendations, got a whole section around the importance of more, sustainable diets in general. As we are kind of coming to the end of the discussion,
can I just quickly add in something on that, Neve, actually? So yeah, it's interesting. I remember last year at the Oxford Real Farming Conference, which I would highly promote for anybody interested in agriculture. So yeah, it was really interesting how the debate came around about, the vegan market. I think it's really important when we talk about, a plant-based diet, that is a whole food plant-based diet, a whole food vegan diet, a whole food diet, because the processed food, as Jack just mentioned, has a massive impact. I mean, I can speak on behalf of the Amazon, and there are huge amounts of forest being cut down right now for taro. And it's like, why are we cutting down all this forest for taro? And it's going into vegan plant-based diet. So we are creating new drivers by whatever our market is. So it's not like we can just say, like vegan market is the only market, because we have to be really careful with that, because we don't want to create new drivers which are going to cause more problems and more deforestation, because we're not aware of where it comes from, how far it's come from, how uber processed it is, and all the big journey that goes into that. So I think it's really key for us to kind of speak about, yes, plant-based diet is definitely getting traction. I mean, the last few years it is mentioned a lot, and it absolutely needs to be mentioned, but we've got to be really clear on what it is that we're talking about. So yeah.
Can I come in really quickly, Neve?
Yeah,
well?
no,
Yeah,
course,
sorry,
no,
Tilly. I know it wasn't
fine.
actually your question, but I just feel as Jack mentioned politicians, and as a politician in the room, I just think I should come in on that, because I absolutely agree. And politicians are really afraid of talking about dietary change. They're afraid of the nanny state label. They're afraid of the behaviour change that we need. In the Green Party, we are very clear that we don't say everybody should be vegan. What we talk about is a move to a much more plant-based diet. So it's less and better meat, because actually also some regenerative projects also have kind of meat production as part of their cycle. So what we call for is the intensive factory farming that is producing meat in a factory-based way. So less and better meat. And absolutely, we cannot be serious about climate change without talking about changes in people's diets, which isn't to say, however, that everybody has to be vegan. It's about less and better. So just to throw that out there.
No, that's great. Thank you. So yeah, we've come to kind of like the end of the recommendations discussion section. And so we've just going to spend the last kind of 15 minutes just to hand any questions out to the audience, if they have any that they would like to ask our panel. But yeah, if no kind of questions arise, then I can hand back to Tilly, and because I know that she's got another question that she can ask. So if there's anyone in the audience that would like to, yeah, ask our panel a question, please do. It's always Ben.
That's what I'm here for. I was just interested that we talked a lot about, well, the link between food and agriculture, not so much about water. And I mean, particularly, Emily mentions the sort of the, I guess, water footprint. But I just wondered if the panelists could just comment on the issues, the challenges with agriculture and water quality, which I think are quite significant as well, and cover both animal but also plant growing.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really, critical point as well, because, it's nitrous oxide from, which is far worse than carbon dioxide, which rarely gets discussed, which is, coming from all the nitrogen fertilizers that's being used on the land, which is killing the soil microbes, and which then means that, water is not able to be stored in the soil, which means then that agriculture has to use so much more water because it's not being held in the soil. Healthy soil acts like a sponge, but because of the way that we're killing those microbes, the soil can no longer hold the water. So that's one of the really important drivers right now, is to really improve our soil health. And then look at ways of how can we reduce the amount of water. Using biochar, is a critical way that we can, improve soil quality. We can retain water in the soil. We can sequester carbon out of the atmosphere. It's got so many pluses, and kind of getting this information, more widely known is really critical.
Emily, I saw you did have your hand up, but it's now gone down. I don't know whether...
I was going to let Jack go next, because
yeah, okay, Jack, you go next.
Let him go first.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I was going to say, so I mentioned something pretty hopeful earlier when we were talking about how I'm feeling quite good about the amount of financing that's moving into more regenerative land management practices. One environmental area where I'm not hopeful at all, and I think we should all be freaking out, is I mean, it was just touched on by Nicola, is chemical pollution is pretty horrifying. It was what I studied in my master's. It is not a world I'm as familiar with now, but certainly was at a certain point. And obviously it's all very interrelated with water courses. And it's not strictly related to the original water question, to be fair, but I just thought I'd take a chance to get everyone scared about it. I feel like it's causing the most damage to getting the least attention from policymakers and the media of any environmental issue at the moment. I'm told by my supervisor that apparently in the 90s, it was a very hot topic and it was kind of discussed in a way that was like suitable given the amount of damage it was causing. But it really seems to have fallen down the agenda in kind of conversations like this. I know there's all kinds of scary stuff that we're supposed to be holding in mind, and I don't think it's necessarily a good idea for us, like mental health wise, to be trying to hold them all in mind. But I think I'd like to see a lot more action. I'm not going to say council level because it sounds like the council don't have enough power, as we've realised today, but a lot more action from the government on this. And I'm slightly worried that one of the results of leaving the EU is going to be that our chemical pollutions management in the long term is going to be much worse. But I guess we'll see.
Thank you, Jack. And yeah, we'll actually add that into the recommendations, because yeah, I think that's a really important point. Yeah, Emily.
I was going to bring it back to councils. Actually, councils, we lack money and we lack power, but we also are able to do really good things. And water quality is something that's really, really important to our council. We have the River Ouse running right through the district. In fact, I can see it from the window of our council buildings. You know, there are twin things affecting water quality at the minute, and I'm one of the people who has really campaigned hard on this, and you know, it's so important to shine a spotlight on what has been going on. And I'm really glad that in a sense I don't have to now in the same way, because actually it's become a huge national issue that politicians of all colours are talking about. So I sort of think, you know, that's that in itself gives me hope. And indeed, I think, you know, the chemical aspects are being much more talked about now. I've seen a lot of stuff around forever chemicals and things like that. In fact, we don't track them, which does give me optimism. So just with my national hat, just to get that out of the way, as Green Party, obviously the Green Party believes that, you know, the current situation with water quality, where just, you know, no rivers in our country reach good status for chemical, and there's only 14% reach status for good ecological status. That's not okay. There's been a catastrophic failure to regulate. We desperately need proper funding and teeth for the Environment Agency to be able to do the job they should be doing. And we also believe structurally the wrong system is running our water, and we should put all our utilities, particularly water companies, back into public hands. So just to get that out of the way. But as a council, actually, we've been able to do some really good stuff. So we have two river restoration projects going on. One of them is the Cock Shoot. So we had a piece of land that we owned as a council, some 6 hectares, which was leased out to a farmer. And we've taken that land back with the Farmers Corporation. He still gets to use it a little bit for grazing. And we've turned that into a 6-hectare wetland, which is restoring a chalk stream, the Cock Shoot, just outside the town of Lewes. And chalk streams are rare and internationally important. I think something like 140 in the world. Most of them are in England, and most of them are, and some of the worst pollution is going on. And that 6 hectares, you know, has multiple benefits around carbon capture, flood prevention, but particularly for biodiversity and restoring some of the water quality. So I think, you know, that's a really good example of where as a council you can do something really innovative. We've worked in partnership. Obviously, it's not just a council project, it was our land, but we've worked with other agencies to do that, some amazing local groups to do that. And we have a second project underway. We've also passed a motion as a council to explore rights of rivers. So as a kind of way to see what we can do locally to give around the rights of nature movement, which is basically saying, okay, so companies, Tesco's, they have a legal status in law, nature doesn't. So we can't obviously change the law. We're a small district council, but we can look at steps which will help to move that dialogue nationally, we hope, by doing what we can locally on that. And finally, on, you know, the other aspects around pollution, we go back to this resource thing, don't we? Waste is a resource. Clearly, you know, we should be making use of the sewage that is flowing into our rivers and polluting them in a better way to fertilize our land. Likewise with the agricultural runoff that Nicola described, we are putting way too much. So there is a national campaign that's Sustainable running at the minute called Planning for the Planet, and they're asking councils to adopt policies that are really stringent on livestock units. So the really intensive things like chicken farms that are poisoning the River Wye. I don't think, and I'd love to, if anyone's out there who's an academic would like to research this, I don't think that's the biggest contributor to the agricultural runoff problem in our area in the Ouse. We have different types of problems going on here. However, we have got in our consultation for our local plan, which anybody can respond to, a really strong policy, the one, you know, the kind of saying a suggestion which the public can respond to, saying, do we need a policy on intensive agriculture? And assuming that enough people say yes, and it gets past the planning inspector, then we will have a really stringent policy. Part of the reason for doing that isn't actually for our own river, but because once one area has got something past planning inspector, it makes it easier for other areas to do. So somewhere in Gloucestershire whose local river is being poisoned by agricultural runoff due to chicken sheds, if they can put that policy in, that will make a real difference. So we can do some small things through our planning policy, is what I was going to say. So you know, that's my kind of bringing it back to the local line.
Great, thank you, Emily. Yeah, because we only have a few minutes left. I did have a question, but I think I won't let my questions take priority. Nicola, you've got your hand raised. Is there anything else you would like to add there?
Yes, definitely. Adding on to that, so I really encourage people to be connected with the Rivers Trust. So I recently just went, same as what Emily was just talking here, I'm on the River Arun and Rother, And they are doing a brilliant citizen science project all across the country, the Rivers Trusts. So encouraging people to get out there and learn about doing water monitoring so that we have more data, because right now there's not enough data on the state of our rivers. So we need a citizen science program to get people out there actually regularly measuring their rivers and water bodies. The other thing I think we really need to make a call on is glyphosate. We can't have really a conversation about agriculture without mentioning it. And the new book, which is, kind of moved on from Silent Spring, is Toxic Legacy, which really talks about the use of glyphosate. And even regenerative farmers use glyphosate. Until it's actually banned, this product will still be used. And my local council uses glyphosate. So in fact, it was right on the wetlands, which is an area of significant importance. It's a Ramsay site, it's a site of special interest, and still the local council was actually spraying glyphosate there. And I was contacted to come in and speak, and I just couldn't believe it. I got the head of the Wildlife Trust to come in, and we clearly kind of made our case as to why the parish council needs to stop spraying glyphosate on a wetland. But that was one tiny little parish council, which makes it really clear that if it's happening in that one council, how many other councils are continuing to use glyphosate themselves right next to rivers. So, I really encourage people to have a look at this book, Toxic Legacy, to inform themselves about glyphosate and to bring up this conversation even within regenerative agriculture.
Great, thank you, Nicola. As we only have kind of a couple of minutes left of the session, I kind of just wanted to maybe actually aim this question at sort of Jack and Tilly, just in terms of sort of, as young people, how do you find ways to sort of, I guess, find like empowerment or get involved in kind of trying to have like a sort of active role in tackling the climate issues.
Do you want to go first, Tilly? I've been speaking a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To be quite honest, I think surrounding myself by like-minded people, as always, helps in them situations. I think sometimes I look at, what councils are doing or, what's done on an individual basis. And I don't know, it kind of don't fill me with despair is maybe a bit too harsh, but it's definitely deflating at times. So I guess the way I feel empowered is, like I say, just bouncing off people with similar ideals and, people who share similar solutions and things like that. But overall, I think, I don't know if Jack feels the same way, but sometimes it can be a deflating topic, I think.
Definitely, yeah. I'll chuck in one thing on a big part of our spiel, micro self-promotion moment coming in, is that there's like some very scary stats based in the UK around how much young people don't feel their environmental voice is being heard, even though there's loads of great things like this going on. That's really petrifying and especially heartbreaking, given that we're like our generation and younger, the people who are going to be dealing with the consequences of decisions that people older than us have made for much longer. And the things that we didn't do and whatnot. So kind of generational justice, despair there. But the hopeful thing that I want to say, maybe nice to finish on, like my rambling on a hopeful thing, is that last year I was preparing for this short speech that I was giving at one of our events. And I was speaking to a bunch of older conservationists. They're mainly in their 70s, who'd been kind of working in the nature, specifically the kind of conservation, nature recovery world for their whole career. And I was asking them what changed over their careers. And they were saying one amazing thing, this was reflected in every chat that I had, was that the public support is really there for this kind of work in a way that's never been true before. We've kind of only existed in the world where companies have had to do a green dance and the public like actually listen to us to some degree when we talk. It's not always enacted, obviously, but this conversation, like people care about this in a major way. And it feels like, even a few decades ago, as they were explaining to me, this was like a bit of a peripheral kind of idiosyncratic concern, and people were like dismissed as tree huggers and stuff. And I feel like a lot of the environmental damage we're dealing with now is an echo of a different societal mindset, which I don't think is really present anymore. So I'm hopeful because now I think people really do care a lot. And I think that's going to be reflected in a few decades' time when the world's kind of looking in a bit of a better state. I guess that's my well, let's hope so.
Thank you so much. And yes, we've come to the end of the session. So thank you so much to our speakers for their time today. For me, I think it's been a really interesting discussion. I hope it has been for everyone else. And yeah, we've got 2 more panel sessions that we're doing today before our event in the afternoon. So if there is anyone on this call that would like to join the next session, I'm just going to put the link in the chat. And this session will be on nature, nature, land use, and oceans. So yes, if anyone wants to join that next session, I will see you there. But yes, I'll hop off and start getting ready for the next session.
Thanks very much. Really
Thanks so much.
great
Thank
session.
you,
Thanks, everyone.
everyone.
Thanks so much, Tilly. Bye, everyone.
Bye.